strange circles in the field. The wheat field stretched to the horizon, a shimmering sea of gold rippling with each breath of wind, giving one the feeling of standing before a lake of liquid gold. Last night it had rained heavily, leaving behind small drops of water on the rice leaves that sparkled like cat-s eyes. In the faint light of the dawn that had not yet fully awakened, each drop rolled down, pattered on the soft ground, leaving behind the musty smell of damp soil mixed with the scent of young pollen. First person to discover it was Mr. Fuck, an old farmer who had been working on this land for more than 50 years. Fuck usually woke up early to check the condition of the fields after the rain, not forgetting to lightly brush away the water drops on his hat. He walked out of habit, his eyes scanning the rice rows, his hands touching each ear to see if the grain was full, until he suddenly stopped. In front of him, in the middle of the normally straight field, was a perfect circle so large that he could see it clearly even though he was standing quite far away. The rice in that circle was pressed down close to the ground in one direction, lying flat in spirals as if an invisible hand had just lightly stroked it. Its outer edge was sharp and regular to the point of being terrifying. There were no footprints, no wheels, no path leading in. It seemed to have fallen straight from the sky. .PHUC stood there for a few seconds, then hurriedly ran back to the village. He gasped for breath as he told his neighbors, who were still yawning over their morning tea. At first, everyone thought he was old and had blurred vision, but when they came out to see, silence fell. The child who used to run around and play held his father's hand tightly, his eyes wide open. Even the chirping sparrow suddenly fell silent, perched on the high branches without chirping. Rumors spread like wildfire. Within hours, reporters from the town had arrived one after another, cameras in hand, questions flying. They weaved through the villagers, set up tripods in the middle of the field, and pointed their lenses at the circle. A young engineer with the group, holding an electromagnetic meter, occasionally looked up and frowned, saying that the oscillation index here was strange. But no one paid any attention. Everyone was absorbed in looking at the circle as if hypnotized by its unnatural perfection. In their ears, the wind blowing through the field sounded long and drawn out, carrying a tone that sounded like a whisper in a language that did not belong to humans. First night after the discovery, the villagers hardly slept. Several nearby houses kept their lights on. Some sat by the window, hugging their knees, their eyes glued to the outside. They said the circle should not be left alone at night. Buck sat quietly on the porch, his hands trembling as he held a cup of hot tea, his eyes darting toward the darkness that was swallowing the field. Suddenly, he heard a rustling sound as if someone was walking on the rice, very light, very leisurely, then it stopped. Only his heart was beating, and he suddenly found himself not daring to breathe heavily. The next day, a student named Kai came back from the city to visit his hometown. Kai is Mr. Buck's grandson, studies physics and often carries a huge camera, likes to take pictures of golden rice flowers to show off to his girlfriend. Hearing about the circle, Kai just smiled. Grandpa is superstitious. It must be a tornado. But that night, he sneaked out with a tripod and camera, wanting to take a photo of the starry sky against the strange circular background. Kai set up the tripod in the center of the vortex, plugged in the remote control, and set the timer. He sat on his backpack, holding his phone to pass the time. Half an hour passed peacefully until Kai noticed a buzzing sound somewhere above his head. It was like insects at first, but it grew louder and louder, echoing throughout his skull. Kai looked around. No crickets, no cicadas. He looked up and saw that the sky above the circle was wrong. The stars seemed to be sucked into the center, swirling gently around a dark spot, darker than the night. Kai shivered, took a step back, and suddenly his legs went limp. A cold current ran straight from the soles of his feet to the back of his neck. He screamed, then stumbled, his hands groping for the flattened rice, still unable to stand up. The next morning, the villagers found Kai's camera, the tripod tilted. The last remaining photo was just a streak of stars stretching into distorted swirls, and in the middle of the photo, a deep black space with no image data. They searched for Kai for 3 days. Finally, he returned slowly from the edge of the village, his clothes covered in mud. When someone ran to help him, Kai looked up, his eyes wide open, lifeless, his lips moving but unable to utter a sound other than ragged breathing. Much later, when he regained consciousness, he only repeated one sentence. They were standing there, in a circle, waiting for someone to open the door. Things got really loud. A group of scientists from a major research institute showed up. They set up an observation post at the edge of the field, carrying infrasound detectors, seismographs, negative ion meters, and even infrared cameras. As night fell, they gathered around the screen, watching the grass glow red, dotted with the bright spots of mice and stray cats. Near midnight, the screen suddenly started to spin, the camera shaking slightly. Then a strange frame appeared, tall, hazy figures, faces indistinguishable, only halos of green light like rusty halos, standing in a circle right at the edge of the circle, shoulder to shoulder, motionless. The station lights went out. A few seconds later, everything was back to normal. The circle was empty, save for the wheat stacked neatly like a well-grown fur. The next day, 2 of the scientists left, refusing to say anything. The other, a geomagnetist, insisted on staying, pitching her tent right next to the circle. She said she heard voices deep underground calling her name, and they promised to show her what no one has ever seen. That night, the villagers locked their doors. The next morning, the tent was there, the sleeping bag was there, the equipment was intact, but she was gone. Grass where she lay had formed a smaller swirl, so finely woven that the rice strands looked like they were woven into a carpet. The whole village stood there watching, no one daring to cross. Then it was the turn of the animals in the village to start behaving strangely. Dogs howled all night long, their eyes rolling white. Chickens refused to eat, their feathers falling out in all directions. Bull went mad, broke through the wall of his pen, and ran straight into the field. People chased after him, but when they found him, he was dead in the middle of the circle, his eyes wide open, his tongue hanging out, purple. Under his belly, the ground oozed a thick, black liquid with a pungent smell that was neither blood nor decomposition. A shaman was invited. He silently walked around the circle 3 times, ringing a small bell and chanting strange incantations. On the 4th time, he stopped, eyes wide open, staring into the center of the vortex, then threw away both the bell and the bundle of incense and ran away without looking back. People chased after him and asked him questions, but he only trembled and whispered, "It's not a person, that thing is not a person." Over the following weeks, the circle grew larger and larger. First, it was only larger than the village square, but now it had almost swallowed half the field. Patterns became more elaborate, with winding bands like underground rivers, connecting the large and small vortices together. At night, faint streams of light would occasionally sweep by, not quite lightning, not quite fireflies, but like thin threads of light flowing through each leaf. The villagers gradually thinned out. Those who had distant relatives had gone to stay with them. Those who did not locked their houses, buried themselves inside, carrying guns, knives, and even ancient amulets. But they still could not sleep, because sometimes in the middle of the night, a distant voice would ring out, echoing as if from underground, singing a song that no one understood, only making their spines tingle and tears suddenly well up. Until one morning, when the sun was still a red ball just rising, the whole village smelled a burning smell like burning hair. They went out to the field. The circle had disappeared. It was not that it had been erased, but the rice within that area had been burned to fine, gray-black, porous ash. In the middle, there was a small pit, only a hand's breadth deep, but it was so cold that anyone who touched it would flinch as if they had been burned by frostbite. People tried to replant rice, but nothing could grow there anymore. The weeds were dry, the leaves were yellow as they sprouted. At night, dogs still howled in that direction, even though there was nothing left to howl. And sometimes the old people heard that if you stood still for a long time at the edge of the hole, you would see the shadow of someone very tall, very thin, standing on the other side looking back. Not moving, not showing his face, just looking, as if waiting.